Angelou, a famous American poet. She was also an author, a singer, a cabaret dancer. She was a journalist and a civil rights activist. She wrote 7 autobiographies, was awarded more than 50 honorary degrees. Pretty extraordinary, right? She's held jobs from being the first African-American female streetcar conductor in San Francisco, but then you probably saw her doing the inaugural poem at the swearing-in of President Bill Clinton. Maya Angelou passed away in May and left behind an extraordinary legacy in her wisdom and in her words, and this is really one of my favorite quotes of hers. It says, "I've learned that people will forget what you said, people will forget what you did, but people will never forget how you made them feel." Isn't that fabulous? Isn't it true? When you think about how you felt this week listening to all these speakers. And what this means is, there are people out there who are going to blow you away by what they do or by what they say. But in the end, it's how they make you feel that really matters. Which means there's room for the rest of us out there who may not be blowing anyone away by what we say or do, but by the accumulation of our efforts, the things that we do throughout our life that make a difference, that change someone's life or lives. It can be one person, it can be many. So I also love this quote because it talks about feelings, which leads me to this question. After hearing all these phenomenal speakers and these moving stories, how are you feeling? Are you feeling inspired? Are you feeling pumped up? I'm thinking, listen to all these people. Look at what they're doing. How can I do something like that? What can I do to fit in to make a difference? Playing to my strengths, because we all have different ways of giving back. But I'm also feeling sad about some of the things that I saw, feeling frustrated that we can't do more, feeling more energized about going back and spreading the word again. So there's lots of feelings going on inside. Does anybody feel the same way out there? Anybody brave enough to say that they have lots of different feelings going on? If so, raise your hand. Anybody brave enough to put a word to that feeling? And maybe it's a word, maybe it's a picture in your mind that you remember, something you saw up here or on our experiential journey. Now the rule is it's fabulous that it's positive, but you don't have to be positive, you just have to be authentic, you have to be real. What's your feeling?
Complex.
Inadequate. Okay, that's a powerful one. And that's what I want to get out there today. And congratulations to all of you brave enough to admit it. You're one step further on this journey. Feelings are very, very important to leading an extraordinary life. Now, extraordinary. Let's take a look at this word. And if you've seen my TEDx talk, you know, you got a sneak peek. But this word is such a neat word because it has this grandiose meaning. And you think about extraordinary people and you think about people who live their lives in the limelight doing incredible things. But in my talk, and what I want to do here today is to remind you of the real meaning of extraordinary, which is extraordinary, or simply one step beyond the ordinary. And that's a pretty achievable thing to do, wouldn't you say? So in my talk, I identified certain ways to take that first step on a journey toward an extraordinary life, that first step beyond your comfort zone. But then I was asked to come here to talk to you extraordinary people, and I thought, okay, you're pretty extraordinary already. And you know how to take a step beyond the comfort zone because we're here in Cambodia, right? And you've probably taken lots of steps outside your comfort zone to get here today, right now. So what am I going to tell you that's going to help you lead an extraordinary life? So I thought, well, I'll do some research. I'll talk to a rather extraordinary teenager I know. She happens to be my niece. She's 16, and in a few days she is going to Taiwan for the year. She won a scholarship there to live with her family, learn about the culture, and learn the language for the first time. And I said, that's an extraordinary feat already. So how are you feeling? I wanted to know. And she said, I am feeling fear. And I said, okay, fear, that's a big word. Let's drill down. What kind of fear are you feeling? And she said, I am feeling like I have a lack of expertise. I am feeling like I don't have much confidence. I am feeling that I'm not necessarily the best. And I have a fear of failure. Anybody out there share any of these fears? Yep, most of you. Guess what? We all do. Remember, we're human, and we have feelings. And it's really, really, really important that we recognize these feelings, because feelings can be the fuel, the hope, the inspiration, the motivation, or they can be the enemy. They can stop you in your tracks. They can paralyze you. Fear is one that can paralyze you. Self-doubt, lack of confidence, those will stop you from leading an extraordinary life. So I'm going to talk a little bit about these fears today. But the point about feelings is that we're here with a bunch of scholars, and if you're like me, you spend a lot of time living in your head, right? And you think things through. We're logical, we study things, we research, but it's really important that we also stay in touch with what's in here, what's in our hearts, and what's in our guts. And we've heard this message from many of the speakers here this week. Why is that important? Because we're not just one big brain walking around. We are human. And our feelings affect the success we have in life. Our feelings affect our actions. Just as words, as Pamela said, affect our actions. So we have to pay attention to those feelings, honor them. And in our society, we're not really taught to do that. We're taught to overcome feelings, to push them away. But we need to feel them, we need to process them, we need to take any information that's important and then move on, and then take action. So, I was talking to my niece, and we talked about different ways to address these different fears. And she said, you know, I'm just worried that I'm not going to be the best at what I do, that there are going to be so many people out there feeling inadequate, she said, to use that word, that are better than I am. And we talked about this quote. In my walks, every man I meet is my superior in some way, and in that I learn from him. And this is Ralph Waldo Emerson. And I said, I get that. That's a really good philosophy. Because I went off to study at Oxford University, and when I got there, I was feeling pretty proud of myself and excited to be there. And then I got there, and I met all these incredible students who weren't just good, they were phenomenal. Not just at academics, but at sports and at music. Do you know people like this? Have you met some here? Yeah. And I've heard people say that. So what do you do when you meet them? Does it knock you off balance? Do you feel less than? Do you feel inadequate? Or do you choose this philosophy? That sure, all the time I'm going to meet someone who's my superior in some way. That's life. And that's the beauty and richness of life. There is always someone to learn from, an opportunity to grow. So that's my first lesson, is to choose to live your life this way, believing that you can grow and that you can continue to take those steps outside your comfort zone, because we need to. And the message that I want to share with you today is that for you all, the challenge will be still leading an extraordinary life in 20 years. Who wants to be leading an extraordinary life 20 years from now? You want the secret? Yeah, I know you can. Get out your pens and paper. This is important. I don't want you to miss it. Really important that you know this one. There it is. Baby steps. Pretty easy to remember. I hear all the pencils going down. I don't need that. Not a big deal. Not a big deal. What are baby steps? I know we probably don't remember when we were a baby, but for a baby, baby steps are a pretty big deal. I mean, they have no muscles in their legs, so just getting up is a challenge. And then they hold on to things, and they take one step after another step, and learn to get their balance, and then they're leaning against the dog, and then the dog runs off and they fall down, and they learn, don't lean against the dog, it's not a solid object. And they have to get back up again after that failure, and they have to take another step. This is difficult stuff. So, okay, that's baby steps in theory and in practice for when you're a baby. What about when you're our age? What do baby steps look like? Well, I went to university. I came out. I was pretty pleased. I had that degree. I'm feeling pretty confident about taking my first baby step, which after college is... What's the first baby step after getting out of university? Get a job, right? Pretty simple. I wanted a job in television news. So I thought, great, I've got this degree, politics, philosophy, economics, and I have this experience already on television. And I'm going to show you a picture about that in a moment. So this is my first step along that incredible journey to an extraordinary life. 1,000 steps. A journey of 1,000 miles begins with one small step. You got to take about 1,000 steps. And you tend to forget that. You sort of leap to the end. And getting that job, apparently, was leaping to the end. So here's a rather fuzzy picture back from the 80s when we didn't have cameras with high megapixels. That is actually me interviewing a young girl from the Asir region in Saudi Arabia. Because my parents moved to Saudi Arabia, I referenced that in a TEDx talk. And when I went over there, I was offered this incredible opportunity to host a children's television show. So I had this great cultural experience and this great professional experience, and so I thought, great. My baby step is going to be coming out of university, degree in one hand, television experience in another, and I'm going to get that first job. And so I started sending out resumes all over the United States to little towns, Paducah, Kentucky, Bakersfield, California, dusty places that are really just stops on a road map for truck drivers. I was humble. I was willing to start anywhere. No big deal. So what happened? Rejection letter number 1. Okay. Open mind, not a good fit. Rejection letter number 2, number 3. Wonder if I should change something. Rejection letter number 4 and number 5. Starting to feel inadequate. Instead of hopeful, hopeless. I could have continued down this road. If I had, it would look a little something like this.
Oh, that's not good.
I need this. Already late.
So let him come. Anybody out there? No. Sorry. Somebody! Hello? There are 2 people stuck on an escalator and we need help. Now, would somebody please do something? Help! I don't believe this. You gotta be kidding me. No, that's it.
Hey, don't worry about it. I'll fix it in a second.
He said he can fix it. All right. That's more like it. He says he can fix it.
You get the picture. Baby steps can be right in front of us and we can't even see them. So when you go through what my father likes to call the sledgehammer school of life and you keep getting hit over the head and hit over the head and the same thing keeps happening, you need to stop. And you need to look around with fresh eyes and take a look and see what baby steps do I need to take. So my baby steps, we're realizing a couple of things. One is doing a children's television show is very different from doing the news. On the news, you need to read a teleprompter. You need to look at that camera like that camera is your friend. And you need to read those words like you're not reading them, you're just making them up as you go along. That was a skill. I also have lived in England for 5 years and I had developed quite a British accent. I call it the Madonna effect from the Guy Ritchie years. She sounded like she was born and raised there. It happens, so I had to unlearn that because, hog farmers in Paducah, Kentucky don't really want to talk to someone speaking the Queen's English. They'd rather speak to someone who sounds a little more like them. And I realized that in order to get these skills, I was going to have to go back to school to upskill in this area. And I took what looked like one big or two big steps backward. I went, after going to Oxford University, to the regional campus of a university that you probably never heard of, to do a hands-on broadcast journalism class. And in that class, I learned exactly what I needed to, how to read a teleprompter, and I even learned how to shoot my own video, so I actually had a tape that I now had of stories, real news stories, not just a children's show. And I took a job locally at a rhythm and blues and gospel radio station. And I wasn't the person sitting behind the microphone. I was the person sitting at the desk when you opened the door, greeting you. I was the receptionist. And I was answering the phone. And I was doing the bills. And I learned a lot about the business side of broadcast. So it was a really valuable experience. And I also earned some money. So I took that money and I hit the road. This time I wasn't going to send those tapes out. That didn't really work for me. I got in a car and I drove all around Florida and Georgia with my tape and my resume. And I went to news stations without telling them. I just walked in the door and I said, what's the best 5 minutes your news director has so that I can hand him or her this personally? I didn't give them a chance to say no. I said, what is the best 5 minutes? And I walked into one news station and the guy said, I'd love to help you. I don't have anything, but let me send you to one downstate in Florida. Hundreds of miles away in an unair-conditioned car. I happily drove. Got there. Well, he shouldn't have sent you down here. We don't have anything either. So I drove hundreds of miles back up to northern Florida, and I walked in the door just to thank him. Thank him, because he did try. And he looked at me, and he crossed his arms, and he said, I'm going to have to give you a job now. This is exactly the kind of persistence we need. You need to be a reporter. So yippee, I got my first job at WCTV Eyewitness News in Tallahassee, Florida. It was fabulous. I was excited, but was I standing in front of the camera with my microphone doing special reports? Was I sitting at the anchor desk introducing those reports? No. I set the alarm for 3 o'clock in the morning every morning, drove 40 minutes to work, went into a little room with no windows and 4 tape machines, and I put some headphones on my head. And I would listen for 2 hours during the morning show for the director to shout instructions in my ear. We had 1, 2, 3, 4 tape machines, A, B, C, D. I had 2 tapes on each one. And she would say, okay, get the tapes ready for this story, this story, this story. The anchor would say, here is Bob Jones with that story. And that was me putting the tape A in machine A and pressing play. And then you'd have your story. This got a bit difficult during sports, because sports highlights, 10 or 15 seconds, right? Okay, so I've got all my tapes lined up. Tape A into machine A, press play, get ready. Tape B, 10 seconds, pop it out. Put tape B into machine B, press play, get ready, pop it out. Put C, you get the picture. Nothing can go wrong. So all of a sudden, through my little earphones, I hear, put in the shack tape, put in the shack tape. Shack tape. A shack is an old garden shed, right? Just to remind you, I lived in England for 5 years, and I was not very familiar with the sporting world, and so I did not realize at the time that Shaq was Shaquille O'Neal, the big man in basketball at the time. Ooh, dead air, a black screen, and very, very bad words coming through those headphones to me. Worst thing that can happen in television. I cried. Stood there in that tiny little room and cried. They went to a commercial break. At that point, I could have quit, or I might have been fired. But they took pity on me, and they didn't fire me. And I chose not to quit. I chose to take another baby step. And that is to come out of that room and start reading the sports page, so that I would know exactly who was playing, and this would never happen to me again. And then I went into that newsroom, and I found news stories, and I put them in front of the director and the producer, and I worked my way up. And I got a job as a reporter, and then I got a job as an anchor, and then I spent 20 years in the news business until I left of my own choice at the age of 45. That's what baby steps can do. They can lead you toward your dreams, toward that extraordinary life. Now, most people in their final year of university believe that they will go out and get that first job. In fact, Accenture did a poll. The vast majority thought they're going to get their dream job and that big paycheck. It's not exactly true. It doesn't always work that way. This woman, Beth Mooney, CEO of KeyCorp, one of the biggest banks in America, graduated summa cum laude from the University of Texas. That's the top of the top. And when she came out and she tried to get a job, potential employers would ask her, can you type? How fast can you type? She took a job at less than $10,000 a year as a secretary. And then she took the next baby step. She actually stood in offices and would not leave until they admitted her to a management training program. She was named, most recently, the most powerful woman in U.S. banking. And a couple of years ago, Forbes listed her as one of the most powerful women in the world. So, successful leaders know that the secret to an extraordinary life, once again, is baby steps. As simple as they seem, they're not always obvious. And then when you start to take them, it becomes clear. Taking those baby steps teaches you. It builds your character. It teaches you resilience. It teaches you persistence. And these are the qualities that we need to achieve our dreams, to do the good work that you want to do, and to lead that extraordinary life. Now, that's what baby steps look like. What do they feel like? Because again, feeling is so important, as I said in the beginning. Well, this is a picture of a street in Detroit. I spent several years reporting in Detroit, and it's a city that's very close to my heart. It's a very challenged city. I interviewed a woman there who impacted me so deeply that I remember her story and tell her story more than any other story when I talk about people I've interviewed. National leaders, pop stars, movie stars. Now, a middle-aged Detroit mom and grandmother. Don't even remember her name. But she lived in neighborhoods like this, where, frankly, there's still a lot of homes that are burned out from race riots in the 60s. There are drug houses, and then there are lots of empty spaces where some of them have been knocked down. These are not easy streets to live on. But her house had this beautiful manicured green lawn, beautifully painted fence. And when you got to go inside, everything was in its place. She had standards that she really believed in, and I admired them. But she didn't stop there. She really didn't have a choice. Who's going to buy a house in a neighborhood like this? She had to live there. But she wanted to make sure that her children and her neighbors' children had a chance at leading an extraordinary life. So she took baby steps, right? She collected her children and some neighborhood children, threw them in the minivan, took them across town to get tutoring, literacy tutoring. Because at the time, and I don't think it's much different now, Detroit had an adult illiteracy rate of 49%. That is nearly half of the adult population in one of the major cities in the United States who cannot read or write above a primary school level. That is stunning. And so when I went to this program, I talked to the tutors and I talked to the students and I asked, isn't this incredible what she's doing? And what are you going to do with it? And they said, yeah, it's incredible, and we are going to try to do something. Get ourselves up and out, and then come back and help our community. But they turned my attention right back to this little lady, and they said, do you know what she's doing? And I said, yeah, it's great. And they said, no, do you know what she is doing? She has to fight to do this. And I said, fight? She's picking neighborhood kids up. I can see it's time and energy and gas money. No. There are parents who are not happy about what she's doing, and they have confronted her. Parents who live in houses like this. And they've confronted her and said, why are you doing this? Anger, confrontation, disapproval. And she had to explain to them, because I'm trying to give your kids a chance. But these parents were afraid. Why would they be afraid? Any idea? They were afraid because, number one, their kids might be smarter than they were, and then they would no longer respect them. Or, worse, that their kids' hopes about leading an extraordinary life might be raised and then dashed. that they would be disappointed. So it was really the parents fearing for their children and trying to protect them. So this incredibly brave lady who lived on the streets of this gritty city was doing something that took courage. And she had to do it despite backlash, and even though it looks to the rest of the world like it was just a baby step. And she changed my life. Now, Eleanor Roosevelt once said, do something each day that scares you. And my point to you is this doesn't have to be jumping out of an airplane or going into a war zone to deliver supplies. For many of us, we won't have those opportunities, or not necessarily the opportunities we need to take. It's the little things, the baby steps that we can do each day that take us beyond our comfort zone, but that can really make a difference in other people's lives. Now, fear. It came up again, right? Fear is an incredibly powerful emotion. So what do you do with it? I mean, we are hardwired when we're afraid to go into fight, flight, or freeze mode. Our heart rate goes up, our vision narrows, and our mind goes nuts. We are in panic mode. Panic mode, like you would imagine the pilot of this plane might be as he's going into this downward spiral. Can you imagine what that feels like? You're sitting there, the G-forces are pushing you back in your seat, you're fighting the controls, and outside everything's going in circles. So pilots are trained to take control in these situations, to take control of their thoughts, because this is really important, cognitive control. I want you all to pick up your programs right now and do a little exercise in this to show you how your minds can take control of you. So take a look at your programs, and I'm going to do the counting, but I want you to start counting the words, okay? Don't read them, just count them. Okay, start counting the words. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. I see some of you not looking. You're not going to get the point of this. 7, 8, 9, 10. Okay, stop. Did anybody actually start reading the words? See, oh wow, you guys have this mastered. Most people will start to read the words because their brains take control. We say we want to do this, and then our brain says, no. I've done this all the time. I know better. So for pilots, they have to learn something called deliberate calm. And Dr. Singh talked about this, calm being a really important thing that we need in our road to success, our road to an extraordinary life. So pilots get into simulators and they train. They train to be in that panic situation and then pay attention to the information from the instruments in front of them. And they train and they train and they train for hours and hours and hours until they are certified. Everyone know the Malcolm Gladwell quote? It takes 10,000 hours of practice to become a real expert, a real master of something. Again, Dr. Singh referenced this. That's to become a master. It takes far fewer hours of practice. Just a few more baby steps for us to learn to take control. Now that is developing the muscle memory in your mind, and this is based on science. We have learned more about the brain in the past 10 years than we have ever known, and we have learned that we can change the brain. We can create new neural pathways. We can create new muscle memories. So we can learn deliberate calm. Okay, so I don't know how many of you are planning on being a pilot and taking the controls of a plane, but you will face panic situations. This building is the examination hall at Oxford University. It's kind of an imposing building, isn't it? Almost straight out of Harry Potter. And at Oxford University, they have this interesting way of being tested, where you learn, and then at the end of several years, you are tested on what you learn. Several years. I'm American. I grew up in a system where we were given a sort of syllabus, we learned a subject, we were tested, and then we moved on. Again, like Dr. Singh talked about, memorization and then moving on. I didn't know how to handle 2-3 years of learning and how to study for that. So I did what every good American would do, and that is I went and I crammed. And I took index cards, and I wrote every fact I could think of on those index cards, even up the side, in tiny, tiny little letters. And I sat and I read those index cards, and I was disciplined. I mean, I studied like you have never seen. And when the day came to come into that building, rather imposing building, and I was dressed in something called sub-fusk, which is a black four-cornered hat, a black gown, white top, and that was what you have to take your exams in. And I sat down, almost delirious, lack of sleep, overstudy, and I was asked to open up my exam booklet. Do you know what happened? All of that learning, all of those facts just disappeared, poof, into thin air, and the page just sat empty in front of me. And I knew what I wanted to say, but I couldn't retrieve the right word, the right phrase. That was a pretty devastating experience. Because when I walked out of that exam hall, I knew that didn't go so well. Just how bad was it, though? I had to wait a couple of weeks. And then my friends had to tell me, because they very helpfully post your results so that everybody can see. So my friends came back and they said, "Oh, Pallas, I'm sorry to tell you." "What?" "You got a third, which is a C." Dead silence, because you're university scholars. Did you just feel the hair raise in the back of your neck? C. I got A's and B's throughout my time there. I had never seen a C. I thought my life was over. I didn't think I was going to recover from that one. And then I had to sit back and live with it. And I had to learn the lesson from this. And that was, I knew this stuff. I had studied for 2 years. I had written essays. I had debated with tutors. I knew this stuff. But I didn't trust that. I didn't trust myself to apply the knowledge and the critical thinking skills. Again, exactly what Dr. Singh said. And I could have found ways to practice that rather than just say, "Oh my gosh, I'm not going to remember anything." All this negative talk. Look where that got me. There was one student who actually fell out of the chair, rolled down the aisle shouting, "I'm an orange, I'm an orange." At least that was the legend. Probably failed, and probably didn't die from it. Probably learned a lesson. Because failure is one of those words, right? Failure is another baby step. Failure is an opportunity to learn. The Silicon Valley motto, the sort of heartbeat of innovation, is fail fast and fail often. And this isn't new. Thomas Edison, "I have not failed. I've just found 10,000 ways that don't work." You talk about choosing to look at a glass half full. That is the secret to success. That is the baby step. Those are the ones that you have to take when you feel that you have failed. I didn't fail the exams, but I failed my own standards. I failed my own expectations. But I was smart enough to finally realize, to learn to trust what was in here. Trust comes from the gut. Trust comes from the heart. And then access what was in that prefrontal cortex and the hippocampus. So I then learned later on in life to do this when I did news, because breaking news would happen. And what do you have to do? You've got to get the camera on and the microphone, and you've got to start talking like you know what you're talking about. And I had read the papers, and I had paid attention, and I had to learn to trust that I knew. And if I didn't know exactly the word, then I would come up with a bunch of words that pretty much said it without saying the exact word. You find tricks. You find ways, right? Okay, so my question to you is, will you have failed if you walk out of this room, and if most of you are under the age of 25, that by the age of 25 you haven't changed the world? Will that be a failure? Because, look at people. Founders of Google, Olympic athletes who often break world records when they're in their teens. There are people out there who can do this, right? Well, yeah, there are people out there who can do it, and they are extraordinary, but you still can be extraordinary and keep taking those baby steps along that journey of 1,000 miles, remember? And that journey is going to look a lot like this sometimes, like you're the only one out there, and you're going to be pretty lonely, and you're going to kind of start wondering, what's the point of this all? Have faith. It's a long road for many of us on this extraordinary life. And by the way, even those people who make it at 25, they still have to keep proving themselves. Whoop. There we go. This is a friend of mine who I expected might change the world by the age of 25. She's the girl in front. Her name is Kathy Bubeyer, and she has a really interesting story. Her parents were not nobility, what's the word? They had titles, they had money, they came from named families in England and in Ireland and in Scotland. And she could have had this life of privilege. I mean, literally, they owned castles. But her family, her parents, chose to give up all their money and all their privilege to dedicate their life toward negotiating peace in places like Northern Ireland, where it was at the peak of the terrorist tensions there, and in South Africa, at the peak of the end of apartheid. And so Kathy had some sacrifices in her life, but she also learned some really important lessons early in life, and that is what dedication and values and service were all about. Kathy grew up in South Africa, and when she left that country at the age of 17 to come to England, where I met her, a black professor went to her, and apparently they were very rare under apartheid. And he told her, "You must come back and give back to the country that gave you so much." Those words never left her. What a legacy he was asking her to fulfill. So I met Kathy at Oxford, and I fully expected her to just go right back out when she graduated and go back to South Africa and change the world. But instead she married Mark, and she had 2 children, and then she had 2 more. And they moved into a boarding school where Mark taught. She led a very traditional life. And it kind of surprised me. So, okay. Now, it was really important to her to be there for her children, and really important to teach them some of the same values. And she didn't use her degree. She actually went back to school like I did, and she learned to teach dyslexic children, which was her way of service, but a very small way of giving back. And she took one baby step after another, and she led this life for 20 years. Until one day, she was offered an opportunity. Actually, it was her husband who was offered an opportunity to take over a school in South Africa called Tiger Kloof. And this school had been very successful at one point and then went defunct, and it was starting to rise again. And here is a little look at Tiger Kloof.
Kilometers from the remote town of Freiburg and the township of Hupe, in the arid north of South Africa's Northwest Province, is not where you would expect to find one of South Africa's most historic schools. But there, Tiger Kloof is no ordinary school. The remarkable story of its birth, closure, and resurrection is one which inspires and brings hope, reflecting the history of South Africa over the last one.
Well, that's too bad. I think we'll have to leave it there. I think you get the picture, and I do have another picture here of what it looks like inside that hall. Tiger Kloof is an amazing school based not only on providing children a safe place to get an education, but also a safe place to develop spiritually. They draw their students mainly from the local town, and you saw some highlights, where they have about an 80% unemployment rate. And you know the problems associated with unemployment, the socioeconomic problems. So they have a safe and wonderful place to come and learn and grow, and then they're encouraged to go back to their communities and give. And then they're encouraged to take it further and give back to the world. So Kathy's changing the world, she and her husband, by doing this. She finally got the opportunity to do something extraordinary that I fully expected her to do 20 years ago. But she knew, she never lost faith. She knew that she was going to take baby steps. She was prepared for that long road. She had faith, she had belief, she had patience. Far better person than I am. And in this, she also learned that happy are those who dream dreams and are ready to pay the price for them to come true, to make them come true. It's a Catholic cardinal saying. But the point is, there's always a price to pay. Either we wait 20 years, or when we get to that point, we have to make sacrifices. That's Kathy and her grown children now, 4 children, I told you how important it was to her to spend time with them as they were growing up, and she fully expected at least a couple of them to be with her in South Africa, but it didn't work out. And so all of her children are now back in the UK living with extended friends and family, which breaks her heart, personally. But she does it gladly, knowing that this is her mission, this is her passion, this was the extraordinary life that she was meant to live. And this is a really important thing, because when you take those baby steps and you keep taking them and you step through failure and you overcome it and you step through objections from other people and you exercise courage, cultivate courage and overcome fear, at some point you're going to reach a chance to take a big leap. For Kathy and her husband, it was going back to South Africa. For me, in my life, it was leaving my 20-year career behind and moving myself and my family to New Zealand. But that leap is just going to feel like the next baby step, because you're going to be so used to it. You're going to be able to do it without thinking twice. You will know in your gut and in your heart that it is the right thing to do. You won't even have to think about it. And you'll learn so much in this journey. Kathy said so often, in the modern day world, we all want to live a lifestyle of comfort and security. We seem to have lost the idea both of adventure and service, not just to our own community, but to the world. Do you agree with this? If you do, I want to hear it. Do you agree with this? Yes. That's why we're here, right? We believe this. But we know not everyone believes this, right? She's teaching this to her children. She's teaching it by the example that she's setting for others. And she is teaching it by taking the baby steps that are required to live that kind of life. A life of giving, an extraordinary life. Okay. At the end of life, we see the big, bright, white light, if you believe that's how life ends. At the end of that long journey, you will have led this extraordinary life. Do you want there to be any regrets? These are the regrets to watch out for. These are the top 5 regrets of the dying. An Australian nurse named Ronnie Ware interviewed people on their deathbeds, and these 5 themes and things came through. I wish I hadn't have worked so hard. Or I wish I didn't. I got the verb tense wrong there. I wish I hadn't worked so hard. Now, we're all hard workers in here, but my caution to you is work smarter, not harder. You will exhaust yourself. Work smarter, not harder. Trust that you know what you need to know. And leave room to rest, to recreate, and to celebrate. I wish I had the courage to express my feelings. People 80 and 90 years old had stuffed their feelings all of their lives, and they regretted it. So on this journey of baby steps, honor your feelings, express them, use them for fuel and motivation, and get rid of the toxic ones, leave them behind. I wish I'd stayed in touch with my friends. So much easier to do on Facebook now. Thank heavens. I had to find Kathy again by Facebooking her son. Okay, I'm so glad that I could. Look what she's added to my life. And I wish that I'd let myself be happier. This came up before with Dr. Singh. Life's about happiness. It's not about total bliss all the time. It comes in moments. Life is a choice. It is your life. Choose consciously, choose wisely, choose honestly, and choose happiness. Take a picture of that one. That's a good one to live your life by. Because happiness is a choice. Remember, you can train your brain and learn deliberate calm. You can train your brain to react differently, to look at things in a positive light. You can choose happiness, and it can become the default mechanism. Okay, a lot of words coming at you, right? And I keep hearing these questions. How? How do I do this? You want to know how? I'm going to do a couple things with you right now. And the first one, it's going to push you out of your comfort zone. But it's a visualization exercise. Okay? This one is by Francis Coombs, who wrote a book called Motivate Yourself. And it talks about taking those positive feelings that you've had after a success in life and transferring them to a new arena, to a new experience, one where you feel less confident, one where you have a little self-doubt. Okay? And I've heard this expressed throughout this week, people saying, I'm not sure I can do this. I don't know. How do I just create this self-belief and this confidence? So every one of you has done incredible things, extraordinary things to get here. I want you to just reach for one memory of something that you really felt like you did well. A presentation, an exam, a sports game. I want you to reach for that memory and close your eyes. And I want you to visualize that memory. A couple of the baby steps you took to get there, and that moment. That moment when you felt supremely confident, when you felt successful. And as Francis Cruz directs us to do, I want you to turn up the volume on how you were feeling. Feel that happiness and that pride and that satisfaction coursing through your veins. And turn up the hue